Hello, coming up on our music listing this weekend at the Cathedral of St. John is an organ piece called When Morning Gilds the Skies. It will be the organ prelude to our 9:15 and 11 a.m. services. The organ solo work was written by living New Mexican composer Fred Frahm, who makes his home in Placitas, and I'm thankful to have Fred with me today. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you so much, Maxine. It's nice to see you.
When Morning Gilds the Skies is from a collection of works titled Faith Alive, Organ Improvisations for Worship, published by Augsburg Fortress, And Fred, before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of this wonderful work, I wondered if first we could just briefly talk about you and your career path and how you ended up in New Mexico.
Okay. I started as a professional church musician when I was 16. So I've been doing this had done this for many years. I recently retired after about 40 years. It's been an interesting path. I worked at the beginning as a Lutheran church musician and have served Lutheran and Episcopal and Roman Catholic parishes throughout my career. Most recently, I was at St. Thomas of Canterbury in Albuquerque before I retired. This particular collection, Faith Alive, was composed when I was at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Bellingham, Washington. And there's many things going on with this particular collection, which I'm happy to tell you about.
As this improvisatory piece is part of a volume of works, can you briefly explain what is an improvisation?
Well, an improvisation for organist or for any musician is where you're basically making a musical performance without a score, something right off of the top of your head. It's an old tradition for parish organists because so much of our music is chorales or hymns or psalm settings. And so part of collecting the music for the service and for connecting it as well is to make music based on songs that we may sing during that liturgy or mass. So in the Lutheran tradition, of course, Bach was a very, very famous improviser. And the idea really was to either prepare or help the congregation to be ready for a hymn that may be sung, or remind them of the words or the style or the character of what the theology was behind that. It was a way to preach without using words. It was also a way to keep their memory of music that they had sung before and that they will hopefully sing again present in their minds. So an improvisation oftentimes is mostly something that you will do in the context of the service, and depending on when and where and for how long and for what purpose, it will take a different shape. That's the best part.
Right. So how does a written down improvisation differ from the more spontaneous ones that we might hear within the context of liturgy?
A written down one, especially with these books, they did come from improvisations, but then the thing about bringing it to paper is now you are in a conversation with your artist self and your performer self and really documenting what you may remember from a performance. I have done so much improvisation that I don't remember all of that stuff. But once in a while, there's a piece that catches my attention or that I feel is a puzzle that I've got to work out or that just needs enough shape so that it feels like a piece of music instead of something that just happens. And so oftentimes composers, especially organists who are kind of working through improvisation, will take that to the page and finish it out and give it the credit that's due in that it was something I made up first, but this is probably a better version, something written out.
What I love about this piece is it's, well, first of all, it's quite sectional, and it's based on a hymn within our hymnal. For those of you who have a hymnal at home, it's hymn number 427. And the text is just so, so wonderful. And the tune is fantastic, Laudes Domini, and I'm looking at the score right now, and it kind of introduces the hymn tune right away in this sort of really cool kind of harmonic progressions. And it's marked at the beginning, piacevole,
Peaceful.
which means
Peacefully.
peacefully. And then it kind of goes into the slightly faster section that builds up into what I call sparkles. It's just so it gets really high in the keyboard range for the organ, which is unique. You know, we don't often play up in that register. For pieces, and so that's really exciting, and then it kind of calms down a little bit and it gets back into that piacevole sort of opening reminder of the tune kind of section. And so I'm really looking forward to introducing this to our congregation on Sunday. Has it been performed in New Mexico before?
I used to play it at St. Luke, but I had to rewrite it a bit. The organ at St. Paul's was 3 manuals, about 64 ranks. And it had a seamless, truly seamless orchestral crescendo. So the spot in the section where the piece starts to get faster and louder and bolder, it could be done in a Eugene Ormandy kind of way. It was really remarkable. And that organ, the keyboard topped out at C. But at St. Luke, it tops out at G. So that top A flat that note didn't exist on the keyboard. So I had to refigure some of that to make that work. That was an important organ. This collection here, the Faith Alive book, it's about 20 years old now, almost.
Yeah.
And most of these pieces, with the exception of 2, were written at the time of this publication of this book. There's one other in here called Schmücke dich, or Soul, Adorn Thyself with Gladness. I actually wrote that for Susan's graduate or undergraduate recital in 1986. So that's an old piece for sure. And it comes out of one of my improvisation classes with David Dahl early on at Pacific Lutheran University. The second work from God, that is the Von Gott will ich nicht lassen, From God Nothing Can Move Me. That was written for an earlier collection and then ended up here. So this particular piece, When Morning Gilds the Skies, one has the arc of a sunrise in a way. It's also for me as a composer, and I've recognized this pattern in my head as being an arc piece, which begins and ends where it starts, and that something dramatic happens in the middle. So the second part about this piece is that where sometimes in chorale preludes, the tune, the melody is an honored guest at a banquet, here's just a point of reference. And especially in my later chorales in the last couple of years, even point of reference is already a problem, because oftentimes the tunes just become fractured, and there will be a few notes from the beginning, a couple more somewhere else in another key, and then I'll may or may not put them together. But the affect of the piece that's what this music or this tune or this text means to me as an artistic expression. So that's what this piece is all about. It totally does have that, dramatic sunrise. Now, granted, in Bellingham, Washington, everything is muted. It's all very quiet and subtle, and the sun comes up and rolls on the horizon in the winter and goes away. But in New Mexico, even yesterday, we had this thing going on as the sun was coming up and the sky was turning all different colors, and then it all kind of settles down to the day. So pieces like that to help describe more than, when morning gilds the skies. Yes, the text is so beautiful, but what does it emotionally say about just watching the sunset or sunrise take place outside? The other thing is that this piece is probably one of the more technically challenging in this book, in particular. And you see the dedication here. It was for a woman named Diane Engel.
I was going to ask you about that, because, dedicating pieces is something that we've been doing, or composers have been doing for centuries. And oftentimes it's for friends, mentors, maybe someone special. Who is Diane Engel?
Well, Diane Engel moved to Bellingham about the same time this book was being composed. And Bellingham is full of large Queen Anne type Victorian homes. And right across the street with this enormous, I remember it was being kind of sky blue with white trim, just huge thing, sitting right on the cliff looking out over the bay. And the church was across the street. And she was an attorney. I think she was general practice. And she also studied organ in various places and was a seriously good player. Major Bach works, lots of the big French Romantic stuff. I mean, could really actually tear it up. And she came over to St. Paul one morning and asked if she could practice on the organ. She didn't have a place to go. And this was an instrument, that was after her own heart. She knew how to play it. And as I was preparing this, we had gotten to know each other, especially by the rep that we had in common. And she came from a different school of study, and it was really, really great to talk about repertoire and how we might make it happen on this particular instrument. And in the months or so before this was published, she had a major stroke. And she became aphasic. She was not able to speak. And she could still play, but it wasn't she knew what the stops sounded like, but she wasn't able to really do the work that she had normally done before. And her husband, Howard, would bring her over and he would sit for 2 hours while she sat and just played a little bit at a time. I gave her this book, but I don't think that she understood what it was about anymore. So it's like it kind of got caught in two different Dianes. The one that was perfectly capable of playing this rep, and we was talking about it, and then one that her body and her mind changed for that. So when I see this, I remember her facility and her incredible artistry. She just, there wasn't many notes that she couldn't play. I mean, she truly could work it out, but she also was this brilliant talent in terms of her legal expertise and what was going on in the world. And so I remember her for that. But as I see this now, it's been many years since I think I mentioned she died in 2016. So it's been a little bit of time here. So all of these dedications, there's always some story behind them. They're rarely ever random. Sometimes composers put those on there to remember someone or to honor someone or as a joke. That happens sometimes, whatever those things may be. But Diane Engel was very special. And you'll hear an intensity about this piece that I think reflects her artistry.
I love hearing all these inside scoop stories about pieces because I think as a performer, it definitely changes my approach. And it just informs me in playing it. Like I might be a little bit more willing now to cut loose in that big section. I was thinking of it as a sort of fortissimo or forte within the context of, it's an organ prelude. Hence, maybe I don't want to scare the congregation away. But now I might just be a little bit more adventurous in my registration. So thanks for that permission, Fred. I appreciate that.
I would push that tempo as far as you want to go.
Okay.
Yeah, just let her rip.
Let her rip. Okay. You heard it here, folks, from the composer's lips.
That's right.
My ears. So just a final question before we close out today. What's on your work desk at the moment?
As a working in publishing or as a composer?
Oh gosh, how about as a composer?
As a composer, I'm actually going through and re-editing the oratorio on St. John the Baptist. I don't know if I show you an old score of that at some point. It's a big piece in 6 movements, and I wrote it so quickly that there are times you have to go back and say, well, does that really work? So I'm kind of rescoring and rethinking and retooling. And sometimes, in this last year, I wrote so many new pieces, like dozens of new organ works. And I left some of those projects on the back burner. And this is one that has kind of continued to call back to my imagination. So I'm going to go back through it. I mean, it's an hour-long piece, and it takes a little time to scratch your head through a few spots. It's like, well, does this really work anymore? Or maybe I can just get rid of it. So I'm kind of going through that process of rethinking.
Sounds like a wonderful Lenten discipline project.
Yep. Sometimes I say, well, who wrote this stuff? And other times like, well, this could be better, or I didn't even remember this part. So yeah, lots of discovery again.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Fred. Oh, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to playing When Morning Gilds the Skies this Sunday morning as our organ prelude to sort of kick off our beautiful services at the cathedral.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad that you're playing that piece. It's a very special work.